years ago, when I'll date myself, my gray hair here, but like when I was coming out as a software engineer, we used to use
At
every
least
time we
you've got some hair.
it's slowly falling out. Yeah, like
You're getting there. You're getting there. Yeah,
yeah,
come
one day
on.
we'll cross, right? So like
Yeah. Hello and welcome. This is Cloud State of Play, the June 2024 episode. My name is Richard Simon. I am Cloud Therapist. I have a great lineup of topics for you this month, again, kind of focusing a bit on DevOps and platform engineering and GitOps and various other things around that space. So you could say it's kind of a DevOps special, I guess, this particular month. And really, who better to do this episode with than Ravi? He's no stranger to the channel. He did a 3-part series with me on Harness and DevOps technologies a while back. But I'm really pleased that he's back on again. So let's say hello to Ravi. Ravi, how are you doing, sir?
Hey Richard, thanks for having me back on. Excited to be back on. Glad we can reconnect. And yeah, it'll be a great conversation to have, and excited for the listeners to give it a listen.
Fantastic. Well, welcome back to the channel. Always appreciate your opinion. You and I have kind of exchanged messages and notes and things all the time. So yeah, great to have you back on. So Ravi, let's just do a quick intro to you because you're kind of first time on the Cloud State of Play episodes. Let's go.
Yeah. So I'm Ravi. I work for Harness. I run today, like my job will change every 6 months here at Harness, but today I get to focus on education. And so we have a bunch of engineers on my team that we focus on how do we educate people about software delivery in the ever-changing landscape in a very hands-on interactive way. But kind of my background, for the first decade, I was a software engineer focusing on distributed Java, kind of made the change into architecture, worked on distributed systems for Red Hat and Mesosphere, and then kind of came into previous company, which was AppDynamics, as a more technical marketing engineer. And now here we are today, a few years into Harness, and very excited to be at Harness and help people learn about all things software delivery.
Fantastic. And I think, Ravi, you're a little bit like me. You're kind of a what I would call a Renaissance man. You've kind of different, you've tried different roles, and I think you're kind of fantastic at maybe jumping in on the deep end and just giving something a go. And if it's of interest, if it's a challenge, I think you're kind of probably in that space, just like I'm kind of kind of carved up my career as well.
Yeah.
We're probably quite similar in terms of what we've done. Fantastic. Okay, well, welcome to the channel, like I said. So let's get cracking on the topics, guys. So first topic that we have is, does DevOps need modernization? So we've heard a lot about platform engineering. There's other talks that I've done on the channel. I'll again include links for those for you to have a look at. But we're looking at really kind of how can DevOps be modernized and kind of bring it up to speed with all the latest technologies. So that's the first topic. Second topic is, what on earth has happened to GitOps? Where is GitOps? We've kind of heard about it. It's kind of took off a little bit, and then various things happened, and we'll mention a few of those. We'll go through those with Ravi. So yeah, we want to kind of get an update on what's really happened to GitOps. And then the last one is cloud cost management. And this is focusing a lot more in that space, in that sort of development space, and what can we do in that space. So that's kind of the focus for cloud cost management or cloud cost optimization as well. Okay, so let's go with the first one, Ravi. So does DevOps need modernization? Now, I've done, as I said, some talks around this. There's a couple of those that are floating around on the channel. So I'll make those available. I did a panel discussion, and we also talked about, is DevOps dead, and platform engineering versus the world and stuff like that, which are all quite interesting talks. But let's kind of start with a quick definition, Ravi. What is platform engineering?
Yeah, so there's like a multitude of terms, right? If you were to give it a Google, like DevOps versus platform engineering, or DevOps and platform engineering, and there's a third job, site reliability engineering will come into the mix also, depending on how specialized you are. If you click on like images, you want like a quick image, there's like these 3 Venn diagrams, but there's like infinite permutations of it because everybody thinks like they intersected different ways. And so, like a very, very textbook definition of, I'll start with the definition of DevOps, and then I'll give a definition, my
Yeah,
definition of platform engineering. So, like
cool.
DevOps is quintessentially, well, actually, I'll give a definition of all three. So, a DevOps professional is typically an operations-focused individual focusing on the development pipeline. Versus if you take a look at a site reliability engineer, they're typically a software engineer focused on operational problems, right? So for scaling and robustness and whatnot. And then here we have something in the middle. We have platform engineering,
Mm,
and so like the our college entrance exams, you don't want to use the definition of the word in the definition, but
yeah,
I'll have to do it this time. Um, Platform engineering is focusing on those platforms. If you take a look at who became platform engineers or who was typically would gravitate towards it, if you go back maybe to the mid 2000s, if you're looking at very, very specific application infrastructure, so for
right.
example, like WebSphere or WebLogic or even JBoss, those folks like who focus on those particular pieces of application infrastructure, those platforms, uh, what you would equate today as a platform engineer? Like, hey, how do I make sure like this particular experience scales in a certain way? Or as time went on and platforms got bigger, such as let's say Cloud Foundry came into the mix, so PaaS came
Mm,
in, or even like now Kubernetes rules the world, right? But how do we make that? How do we make sure that those particular systems are resilient? That might sound operational, right? How do we make sure we're giving the experience of the platform to people who need it, when they need it, and even if you need to gatekeep it, why they need it? The platform engineer, depending on the pundit, like there's these big platform engineering firms like Humanitech and whatnot that
yeah.
they might say like, hey, you know what, the platform is all about developer experience, right? So that this
Mm,
is the platform itself. So it's I like to decouple like the technology and the quote unquote the platform as the experience, but
mm,
it's you're hyper focused on the experience and the infrastructure around the experience as a platform engineer. But the same argument can be made for a DevOps engineer also, depending on how big a place is. If you're a one person shop, you have all the job titles, right? If you have
yeah.
hundreds of people in platform engineering or developer experience in your firm, well, you can subdivide. But I gave you a really great answer there, but it's they're so tightly coupled.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's kind of maybe some of the the difficulty that people have kind of distinguishing between, especially maybe if those have kind of already been doing platform engineering. I think one of the articles that we looked at, platform engineering, a guide for CTOs. You guys have written also some stuff on those we'll mention later. But on this particular article called A Guide for CTOs, it said platform engineering involves designing, building, and managing the foundational infrastructure that supports software application development and deployment. So encompassing things like technologies, frameworks, and practices. And I guess that's kind of, and obviously that encompasses the entire, sort of software development lifecycle, the SDLC. And I guess yes, I think that's right. Now, there is an element of sort of platform engineering, which is really, PE and this element is kind of really come into, I suppose, and modernize, sort of DevOps. And you can maybe give us a little bit of your thoughts around that. But this idea of this internal developer platform is something of interest as well. So what is an IDP?
Yeah, so internal developer portal is basically imagine it as like a very, very condensed piece of information, or I hate to say like I don't want to say a glorified wiki, but I'll say like maybe it's a glorified wiki that
Right.
all the information is upfront to an engineer to get their day job done. So like,
Yeah.
hey, you know what? Here's a software catalog. I'll take a step back and talk about the problem. So in my
Mm,
career, I must have been on 10 plus development teams, but everything focused around Java, right? And every time I would change teams, I always felt a little dumbfounded. I was like, even as several years as an engineer, and I changed
yeah.
teams, like team to team, everything's different. There's like you're expected to kind of like learn in the first 30 days. Oh, here's how I set up my IDE, or like, hey,
Mm,
like where are the secrets, or where's the config file, or like
yeah.
who owns this, right? And as I became
Yeah.
more senior, it's like we have more and more services, so it's not only your little service. It's like you have to partake in the ecosystem. Like I need something from this service, who on earth owns it?
Yeah.
And so this is where like IDPs come in, like that uneasy feeling you get every time you change jobs and you have to like learn again. Like
Mm,
IDPs like eradicate that. Like it's like, hey, here's all the service owners, here's the technical documentation, here's like the n number of services that your service will talk to. Here's like the Swagger documentation. even more so, like IDPs are getting sophisticated, that they can start getting metrics back from, let's
Mm,
say, your CI/CD pipeline. Especially with
right.
Harness, we have an IDP product that it does that, saying, hey, you know what? Here's your service is 95% successful being deployed. You know, you
Yeah.
can surface DORA or space metrics up front, depending on who needs it. But they are great pieces of information. It's everyone I talk to about IDPs, like everybody likes it. Like just some pieces of software just like invoke like, you know, emotion. Like oddly, people dislike Jira for some reason, maybe because it's how
Yeah.
they get tasked to do work, and they're like, Jira,
Maybe.
you know,
Yeah.
my existence. But
Yeah.
oddly enough, like the people I talk to, everybody kind of smiles that yes, it solves a legitimate problem. Like
Yeah.
we used to have to maintain like 30 different Confluence pages, and people would just not read it, versus very condensed in the IDP.
Yeah.
It's very dev centric, and so I'm a huge fan of IDP.
Right. Yeah. And some people I think call it platform. Some people are calling it portal. Again, there seems
Yeah.
to be some elitist kind of discussions around, or purist, I should say, maybe
Yeah.
discussions around those two terms or words rather, two terms.
Academic is a
Yeah.
more friendly word. Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
discussions.
Yeah, but it's quite interesting to hear that. Okay, so so is, you know, just generally speaking, somebody who's kind of been doing DevOps,
Yeah.
kind of the traditional, now we can call it traditional DevOps, um, is kind of platform engineering the way to modernize that? Because you guys kind of focused on that on, you know, on your website. There's a lot of kind of
Yeah.
talk around sort of how do we modernize DevOps. So what's your kind of take on that, Ravi?
Yeah, which is always funny. Like any engineering term, like it used to be DevOps used to be the modernization, right? Like but
Mm,
years ago, and now it's like, well, how do you modernize DevOps? It's kind of a cliche saying. It's like, how do you modernize software engineering? Like the
yeah.
discipline's been out for so long,
Mm,
and even like, you know, if you're looking at kind of the mid 2000s, like when DevOps was just coming about, like, you know, how do we people process technology? And now we're at a point that like it's you know, even if I'm trying to decouple like, you know, like DevOps as a discipline versus DevOps as as a philosophy. And
mm,
so more so as a discipline, it's been out for several years now, or pushing like 10 plus years. Like it's very mainstream to have like
yeah.
a DevOps mindset. Like anything would get like there's revolution, evolution, modernization is the only thing that's going to happen in software. The cliche is that, you know, the only constant is change, right? And so change will always occur.
Yeah.
Um, for, you know, kind of the challenge with, if you're taking a look at what people would call DevOps, people would paint like a wide brush, like, hey, you know what DevOps is? Everything under the sun, anything that the system engineer used to do. Congratulations, you're DevOps. Oh, anything that the software engineering team or the app dev team doesn't do, it's a DevOps problem. You know,
Yeah.
like it's like you have a huge like base of things to do.
Yeah.
And so, but because there's such a wide gamut of capabilities, I'll take a more academic approach. I'll give into the academia of platform engineering. Is that, you know, platform engineering is all about engineering and experience for folks, right? And
Yeah.
so, like, kind of like core to like being a platform engineer is that you, as a platform engineer, are engineering experience for your internal customers to be delighted, because it's like the internal customer argument. If your internal customers are happy, they will delight your external customers, right? So there's no toil. But because of I'll pull out my phone because of this, you know, this thing here, right? Like you and I have a consumerization of enterprise IT. We have like a certain expectation that in our consumer life, like things are easy.
Mm,
Why is it for our, you know, what pays the bills, our day job, why are things hard? And
mm,
that's been a big push for platform engineering. It's like, how do we make things easier?
mm.
IDP is a good example, right? Like, how do we make it easier for developers or our internal customers to come up
Yeah.
to speed or get ramped? IDP was born from that. Platform engineering is the same way, right? Like, how do we take all these disparate tools and present them in a unified front? And,
Mm,
you know, paying homage to Harness, like we have, you know, 12 different capabilities or different modules that we have, which are all disparate. Like, if you think about it, each one of these can be a point solution. We kind of take those and make them into a
yeah.
platform, right? And so that's similar to what platform engineering is doing. How do we tie, like, hey, maybe you know, you have a company portal that has access to all your tools, or you have
Yeah.
a unified, what was it on this on platform as a service that says PaaS? Oh, the service catalogs. Yeah, like, hey,
Mm,
you can deploy, you know, Kafka and a Spring application at the same time. So click, right?
right.
And so
Right.
it's kind of the similar way, right? How do you engineer that experience for your internal customers?
Sure. Okay. So are we saying then that kind of platform engineering is sort of complementing and updating DevOps? Is that kind of the idea?
I would say yes. Like they're because the Venn diagrams are so close together. Like
Mm,
they're definitely they're needed. Like there's not you can't have one without the other, right? Like
right,
if you have no developer efficiency that DevOps will bring versus like the experience is bad, like
yeah,
you're just nowhere, right? And so but both are needed. And both are, this is a little more intrinsic of an answer. It's like who like if let's say you have people like who would typically gravitate to those type of roles.
yeah,
Um, is this is a very uh broad example? Like typically folks who are going into DevOps or who were early in were system engineers, right? So there were
right,
the SAM system engineers kind of went over the olden folks who would tweak your Kafka queue, right? Or people who
right.
would like, hey, we want to like people who would make sure that very specific pieces of application infrastructure were available. They typically were going into platform engineering, right? But the both sets of skills are like extremely important. So I'd say that
Yeah.
they complement each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I was at a meetup recently and I spoke to somebody and they were kind of in development. And I said, so we were kind of talking about this whole sort of DevOps and platform engineering. And she said actually they had been doing platform engineering before kind of platform engineering became a thing, like a
Yeah.
title. So I think people are maybe recognizing those patterns that they had been doing before, and now they kind
Yeah.
of maybe become a lot more official. So philosophically speaking, just one point on that. I have a view on this, but do you think then, platform engineering is a kind of a shift left for DevOps to kind of, some people call it a DevOps done right. What's your view on that?
Maybe because like you have to focus on your like with platform engineering, you have like a hyper focus of your on your internal customer.
Yeah,
And that's not to say that like DevOps does not, right? Like it's like it just depends on like where you are.
yeah,
I would say that experience, internal experience is paramount in
mm,
platform engineering today
mm,
in 2024, right? Like, not taking away from like, oh, the olden, I run our PCF instance here at, company XYZ, like those
yeah,
platform
yeah,
engineers.
yeah,
Internal experience is paramount. From a DevOps engineer perspective, efficiency is paramount, right? And
right,
so there's that, right? But
yeah,
why
yeah,
can't you have both? Why can't you have experience and efficiency?
right.
That's my argument. Yeah.
Right. Cool. Okay. Yeah. And I think, I mean, we won't dwell on this sort of, YPE and stuff like that. I think
Mm.
why platform engineering, I think, but those sort of reasons have already been, done to death in terms of kind of, providing golden path, standardization, reducing complexity, compliance, it's a framework,
Yeah.
focus on DevX, which I think is interesting. I suppose it is kind of in that sort of way, it's kind of focusing on that. I think the skeptical part that I've had has always been, you know, DevOps or developers in general tend to be kind of slightly artistic in terms of how they do things. So when you start sort of boxing them into standards and frameworks and things like that, I don't know how they would maybe react to that. That's kind of been the only thing I've had really maybe as a counter to platform engineering itself. Okay, so there is a section on Harness's website, like I said, which is talking a lot more about DevOps modernization. So I'll point you guys to that. There's a link. I'll provide the link in the description of the video. We talked about the guide for CTOs about platform engineering. Again, it's a separate article. I thought that was quite cool. So again, we'll provide some information in regards to that. Thanks to Saim, my friend Saim, for pointing me to that. And also the field CTO at HashiCorp, Sarah Poland, has actually written an article on measuring IDPs, which I thought was really fantastic. That's actually looking at the value of platform engineering and IDPs and things like that. And she does go into a lot of detail, which is fantastic. Again, I'll probably hopefully have Sarah on the channel to do a separate talk on that. But again, that's another article to look at, and we'll provide the description for that. So Ravi, just last point on this particular topic, what is kind of, how is harnessing kind of Harness helping customers rather and enterprises kind of modernize their DevOps? What's the kind of stuff that you guys are, getting into?
Yeah, at Harness, we have a lot of we have a very robust software delivery platform, and the capabilities are growing every day. So just shameless plug here, like we have an IDP module in our
Yeah,
platform where we have a chaos engineering module in our platform where we have the core CI/CD, we have core engineering efficiency type of like measurement in our platform. And so we're really giving organizations or individuals the Swiss Army knife to say, hey, you can choose what you need to use here in a very platform-centric way. And so kind of our modules are kind of, they all build on top of each other. So there's very good integration between them, but you're not forced to use all the modules if you don't want. If you just
Right.
focus on
Yeah.
you can. And that's kind of it. I mean, this is the area we play in. And also like kind of the where my team comes in, the education team, is that we get the benefit of working with a lot of our customers. So we like to share like, hey, we don't name any names, but it's like, hey, you know what, your peers are doing this, or like, hey, you know what, this we saw this somewhere, it was really cool, and you think you might benefit from it. So also we have a very coaching consultative approach, when you deal with Harness also outside of products. So it's great for folks in that area.
Cool. All right. So let's move on to our second topic, which is what on earth has happened to GitOps. Now, before we start, I think maybe some folks that really know kind of what GitOps is and where does it fit in. So Ravi, give us a quick definition of GitOps, please.
Yeah, so GitOps, the term was coined in 2017 by a firm called Weaveworks, and it basically it was writing the rise of Kubernetes, so like declarative based systems. But they had like these like I forget how many 4 or 5 pillars that they had, but basically TLDR, the word get is in there, so that it has to do with like your SCM solution, right? So basically it's saying that your canonical state of how you want your application or your infrastructure, basically they use system, right? So the canonical state of the system is stored in source control. And then via tooling, tooling would apply that canonical state. And if there's drift between, let's say, the example would be, I say in Kubernetes, I want one pod in my replica set. I don't know why you do that, but you say, let's say you have two pods in your replica set. And someone went in and directly connected to the cluster and said kubectl, scale, to 3. By reconciliation and say, hey, the declare state in get said 2, there's 3 in the cluster, go and reconcile and make it 2 again. So basically what you're defining your system state in source control, you're applying it automatically, and if there's any drift, the drift will be reconciled. And that's the TLDR of what GitOps hopes to achieve.
Right. Yeah. And it's kind of based on this pull request type of approach. Is that correct? That's kind of there's supposed to be doing.
There's a couple of things like that's bringing in like the SCM portion of it. So like how change is done in the system, they're mimicking like software engineering. Like if you're looking at like source code changes, like if you're using GitHub, it's like a pull request. If you're using GitLab, it's like a merge request. But basically, it's a workflow to like take your changes and integrate them into another branch or another area that another trunk in the branch, depending on your flavor. And once it's merged in a certain branch or trunk, it's then propagated throughout the SDLs or the rest of the systems that it needs to go, right? So that's where it is. So the approval process, instead of being ServiceNow, is a pull request, right? So you're using Get or GitHub as an example there.
Right. Okay. So for somebody who's kind of been doing sort of DevOps and CI/CD, and again, kind of the traditional version of that, how does kind of GitOps fit into that workflow? What is the changes? Do they have to kind of change tools, or that workflow needs to change? What's the kind of integration point there?
Yeah, I think I had a pretty opinionated when GitOps when GitOps was first coming about, I had a very like an ice cold heart about it. I was like, this is nothing new is about this. Like years ago, when I'll date myself, my gray hair here, but like when I was coming out as a software engineer, we used to use
every time you've got some hair.
It's slowly falling out. Yeah,
you're getting there.
Yeah, one day we'll cross, right? So like, right when I came out, this is like mid 2000s. Like I was at IBM, and when I would commit to ClearCase, like a build would kick off automatically, and it would deploy to a lower environment. Like that was one of the core things. Like if you commit a change, you'll see it appear somewhere in GitOps. I was like, I was committing to source control, and we were kicking off a build and a deployment. Like our deployment was like a shell. CP this jar file somewhere. I mean, it wasn't very sophisticated, but it was all done via like, hey, that's the case. And they're like, oh, GitOps is different. Now, GitOps, in my interpretation, is the last mile, right? It is the deployment mechanism, right? So like all of your change control, all of your the confidence building exercises that you need to
Mm,
do testing and whatnot or compliance, that all stays the same, right? It's
mm,
just like you're using a GetOps based approach to deploy. So you get a couple benefits with that, right? Like saying you're already on like by doing GetOps, you're understood your own Kubernetes, right?
yeah.
Like now, it's not unique. 2024, like it's not you're not unique if you're using Kubernetes. You're actually more unique if you're not using Kubernetes, right? In this day.
Right.
But it's kind of assumed that you're on a
Yeah.
K8 stack that you're
Yeah.
using. And then also there are tooling that like will take the GetOps mantra and kind of enforce that, right? So
Mm,
the big name would be like Argo or the Argo
yeah.
project or Argo CD that it or Flux, right? So the two main engines out there today, there was more, but some of them kind of fell out, like Jenkins X and Flagler and whatnot. As like
Mm,
any technology, time goes on, certain things take off, certain things don't take off, or get more adopted. And those tooling is more for reconciliation, right? So like those toolings are more for drift detection. Like kubectl apply is kubectl apply no matter what. Any sort of CD solution can do that, but the drift detection and the reconciliation, the synchronization, what in our I'll use Argo terms, the app sync or the synchronization
mhm.
is specific to the tooling, right? So if you're looking to get that kind of drift detection or you're looking to kind of get that auto reconciliation, you would need to use a certain kind of GetOps provider to do that. Not saying you can't do
Right.
that by the manifest every half an hour if you care to, but those toolings will install like operators on the cluster to kind of check against the previous state. So yeah, it's the last TLDR. It's the last mile.
Yeah.
Not much you have to change, right? Especially if you're using Kubernetes. Like at the end of the day, there's a manifest coming somewhere. No matter if you're using Kustomize or JSON it or
Yeah.
Helm, there's a manifest somewhere. When that gets applied, that's the only piece of tooling you have to change.
Okay. So yeah. So kind of in a diagram, would it kind of fit at the end of that pipeline? Is it kind of fitting at the end, or is it kind of just um, a separate diagram, so to speak, but it has interconnection with your pipeline to, as we said, to pull off those those configurations, those golden configurations.
I think like it will be both. Ironically, it actually will start at the very beginning of the pipeline, at the inception of the code. So
Okay.
like it would be at the very,
Oh,
very
okay.
start
Interesting.
at the
Yeah.
get part. Yeah. So
Yeah.
understanding that like it's kind of like with the GetOps mindset, like it's not like you can't pull off this mindset in a
Yeah.
non-K8 step,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like it's very, very possible to do that. Like the mindset is anytime, if you think of this mindset, anytime you commit a change, imagine it needs to go somewhere. And so there GitOps makes that a little bit easier because like it's all, you can you can have like declarative infrastructure, right? You can
Mm,
use like Crossplane, you can have like software defined storage networking that, it's
yeah.
all set up for you automatically. Like you can take the app infrastructure and infra into like GitOps pipeline.
Yeah.
Easier than tying together like OpenStack and like, several different cloud providers and
Yeah.
whatnot. Kind of get that. So to your direct question, it both of those models work. The hyper focus if someone's looking to change tooling will be at the very last
Right.
mile, but understanding it is actually coming in at the very inception of like when
Mm,
things that might not even be caught by your pipelines. Certain
yeah.
people pipeline triggers after the commit, right? Like you need to kind of consider like there'll be a lot of commits, like depending on the organization you're in. So
Yeah.
both
Yeah. Yeah.
both would be my answer.
Cool. Interesting. Yeah. I think maybe now that you're in education, maybe you can actually do that diagram. That would be really cool.
Yeah, yeah,
That would be really useful to do. Okay. All right. So yeah, so obviously you mentioned Argo CD and Flux as kind of being the two projects. I think those graduated from the CNCF. Was it last year? I think I read the announcement. So that was quite
something like
interesting.
that. The years blend together now. It's your last
I
year
know.
this year.
I know.
Yeah. Or
Telling
last
me.
KubeCon was like November, North America was November, right? So I was like, had to be
Yeah,
something
yeah, yeah.
around there. So.
Yeah, no, that's true. Okay, yeah, and unfortunately, Weaveworks stopped trading earlier this year, so they kind of closed up shop as an organization. But again, I mean, we have obviously CNCF as the kind of the largest supporter there, and yeah, I mean, I guess that was kind of a little bit of a setback with with Weaveworks. I read a little bit from the CEO of Weaveworks. He said that this sales growth was a bit lumpy in 2023, as he put it, and then he said our cash and position consequently was volatile because of that. So and then I think they were unable to really officially find a buyer, so they kind of closed doors at that point. Okay, so we said kind of infrastructure as code is kind of part of that, and that's all kind of fitting into this, into this flow between GitOps and your sort of traditional DevOps. You guys have written an article, I think, around this as well on your website. So again, I'll provide links in the description of the video. So just kind of looking forward now a little bit, Ravi, what's your take on what's next for GitOps?
I think GitOps kind of follows like the technology curve in Kubernetes pretty closely. Like there were times that people tried to couple it, but the coupling is there. Like it's kind of assumed that because of the declarative nature that GitOps requires, like the ultimate declarative state system today is Kubernetes.
Mm.
And so as the ebbs and flows of Kubernetes kind of occurs, or the Kubernization, I'll make up a word here, the Kubernization of things that were not
Urbanization, yeah.
have not there before. It's kind of the cannibalization of Kubernetes. I'm trying to use all these big words today. It's early in the morning. Big words, yeah. So it's like, it can also kind of follow suit with that, right? So like a good example would be like you just mentioned, like infrastructure as code. Like
Yeah.
used to be that IAC was not part of the pipeline. Like if you had to use Terraform is not declarative, right? Like
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
or it's not it's not a declarative state system Terraform. It might be like, hey, you have a recipe, this is what you need, like it's not like the end state is not like how you have it's not managed by Kubernetes. But there is a declarative IAC called Crossplane out
Yes.
there outbound, right? And so that even things that were not touched by Kubernetes before, like now, like your S3 bucket can be Kubernetized because Crossplane is the provider, the IAC provider that would interact with it. And so that's what's happening there. Also, like different trains of thought that are going on. In there's two more things. Like what's going on in Gulf or the Gulf market right now is like even if you take the providers out of it, like what's going on in the Kubernetes marketplace. For example, there's been a little bit of a pushback with like Kustomize, ironically. Like people are fed up to their ears with like templates, right? Like the going mantra is like anything between you and kubectl, it could be a lie, right? Like at the end of the day, like the manifest is the manifest. Helm, Helm, Kustomize, Case on it, JSON it, any one of these like templating engines that are out there, there is some interpretation that has to go on between your template and then what gets translated from the template to like a lengthy, like fully qualified or raw manifest, and then that gets applied. And so like anytime you have a system like interpreting something, I mean, it's like a typical system design or system engineering or system engineering problems that something could be lost in translation, right? Like the list you have. And I've been kind of picking up on that in the KH market in general. Like go back to there's a oh god, what show was it? It was like a going trend in social media is like people sitting on like a transatlantic flight and they only stare at like the map. It's like, oh, we don't like, it's like I forget what the term is, but like they're having a raw experience on the flight. They sit and like just watch the flight map for like 9 hours.
Yeah.
So the same thing, we need a raw manifest
Yeah.
right? So the tooling is like kind of like keeping up with that. Also, because there was so much choice, right? Like in GitOps, like unfortunately having to weave, right? Like, but like the Argo, Flux, pay homage to Flagler and Jenkins X, right? They were both trying to be, GitOps engines, right? At the time, that you end up with a lot of different engines, right? And so like, how do you like? Does the engine really matter at that point from a platform engineering experience? Like, hey, how do you that last connection? Does your internal customer care? No, they don't care. As a developer, like I don't care if we deploy via Flux or via Argo. I just need it deployed in a certain way, and that kind of like tooling around that, making agnostic, like shameless plug for Harness. Like our GitOps tooling that we have is engine agnostic. So like you can kind of pick in the pipeline, like which one of these, like GitOps class of tools that you want to kind of deploy with, and we give you a choice. But that's what kind of I've seen in the GitOps marketplace.
Cool. Yeah, and I think is it CodeFresh is I think one of the other guys, one of the other players in that space. I think for a while it was kind of somewhere between Weaveworks and CodeFresh. But yeah, you guys, I think I read the article that you had about stepping in to kind of provide support for Weaveworks sort of customers. There was a lot of, I think, content from you on that. And there was also another section which you guys mentioned, your continuous delivery and GitOps module, kind of, as you said, natively supporting Flux. And is that kind of something that you guys are sort of pushing at the moment, or is there kind of take up from customers on that? What's the
Yeah.
what's the status of that?
We can deploy in like three, like with the harness CD and GitOps module, like you can deploy in two. Well, you can deploy in a GitOps fashion or a non-GitOps fashion, right? We have a lot of customers who are using like VM or ECS still, right? So like those methodology, like that last mile methodology would not apply to them because like you can't
Right.
deploy ECS with Flux, right? Or at least I don't think you can, like or I'm very sure you can't do that. And so our pipeline support both, right? Like you can pick which one you want, and you say, hey, you want to spin off some sort of like test in another more long-lived pipeline. With also with the GitOps pipeline, typically they're very short-lived, right? So like running like a load test or a soak test doesn't make sense in a GitOps pipeline because you want instant change, right? You don't want to need to run a 3-day soak test in our trading platform, right? Versus a more traditional CD pipeline is a workflow, so we can kind of like pause and like hang out and wait for your decision. We blend the best of both worlds, so you can do both with us. You can say, hey, we want the last mile to be applied by GitOps once the soak test is done. But yeah, we've baked the best of both worlds in both the traditional, we hate to say traditional CD pipeline and GitOps CD pipeline that we have, but we have support for both, and you can intermingle them also.
Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. Let's move on to the third topic, which was cloud cost management or cloud cost optimization. Now, I think there's, again, you guys kind of distinguish between sort of the more sort of heavy duty FinOps sort of approach from the sort of cloud cost management or optimization side of things. But let's start with a quick definition of FinOps. What's kind of what's your view on FinOps?
FinOps has it's a very important practice, right? So it's a relatively like newer practice as spend has left inside the four walls of an office to you have multiple providers providing you cloud infrastructure, right? There's three pillars to FinOps. If you look at the academic definition, there's the base of it is cloud cost management. So like how do you optimize the cost? But the other two are is governance and business alignment, right? And so like how do you optimize the cost? But why are you optimizing the cost? And how can you enforce those cost optimizations like a continuum, right? And so like FinOps includes all three practices. If you're a FinOps professional, you very well could be a business professional, right? Or a finance professional going into this area. Our first set of FinOps people at Harness were in finance, actually, before we built the module, and so that was kind of the history, at least internally in Harness.
Right. So, kind of contrasting that with as we said, with the sort of cloud cost management side. So tools like KubeCost, for example, they focus very much on your Kubernetes clusters. So there is that sort of difference there between FinOps and sort of cloud cost management, where the likes of KubeCost is kind of focusing, laser focusing on one particular area, and it wants to save you money there, versus maybe FinOps being, as you said, they're kind of a more of a framework approach. Is in your experience, have you seen FinOps being, and this kind of, I've experienced a little bit of this, and this is why kind of I'm maybe canvassing for other thoughts as other views as well. Have you seen FinOps being harder to retrofit for enterprises versus, as I said, this kind of very sharp approach on the other side, which is to do with cloud cost optimization?
I think it would be the opposite. In my opinion, like it's actually vice versa. Like businesses since the beginning of time would like to optimize cost, right? And so the kind of the area. So how I'll give you two very concrete examples, and then it would be, this is why FinOps is so important. We at Harness, prior to us like developing this module, like our CFO was like, why are we spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on this one account that's like in AWS? And then he went to the CTO, and CTO's like, I don't know. And then the CTO went to like the VPs, and you're like, we don't know. They went to the directors, and then they went to this. Then it came to like the managers, right? And they're like, oh, each one of us had like something else going on. And so it's like the businesses know that what they're spending, but like, how do you optimize it? Like, we get the bill from AWS. Clearly, we
Yeah.
know how much it costs, but like,
Mm.
is that bill? That's a juicy bill right there
Yeah.
for what we're this non-prod environments, right? Like, we can't recognize the cost. You know,
Yeah.
we can't. It's hard for us to like directly pass it on to the end user or the customer, right? And so that's where kind of like I think FinOps is driving the cloud cost management. It's also it's very hard. Like in your cloud spend, I didn't really like my very first taste of like how complicated cloud billing
Mm.
is that in this is going back to way in 2013. This is like my first taste of it was I interviewed at AWS to be a solution architect. So I had to decide between I went with Red Hat. So I had to drop off from Red Hat and drop off from AWS. And so part of the like their interview process that they would like give you like $50 credit AWS, you have to build something and present it. So I built something and presented it, and I thought I turned everything off. Like I
Mm.
get my credit card, right? And like I spent like $48, and like every month I would get like a 30-cent bill from AWS. And I was like, I wouldn't notice it. And then finally, like after like a year, I'm like, why am I still getting like the credit expired?
Yeah.
Right? Why am I getting these 30-cent bills? I thought I'd log into my AWS account. Everything is deleted. There was like one like DNS address that was dangling. I had to end up disputing the charge on my credit card because when I open up a ticket at AWS, they're like, we can't see what it is for 30 cents. I'm like, I just deleted my credit card from the profile. I'm like, okay,
Mm.
I'll fix that problem.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
not gonna stress not paying anymore.
Yeah.
But like it just goes out of sight, out of mind. I could have sworn like I was one person who made one application that I presented and I thought I deleted everything. Imagine a company of thousands of people doing that, right? Like, how do you keep track of that? And that stuff
Yeah.
is even to like to the cloud vendors' own admission. They're like at least 30% of cost is waste. And if they're
Mm.
saying 30%, it's probably 50%, right? Like even to
Yeah.
their own admission, like, hey, you know, at least half of our business, a third to half the businesses, whoopsie, you know, like
Yeah.
it's wasted. And that's where the kind of the cost optimization of FinOps really is. Because as the amount of dollar spends, like it's not like you
Yeah.
and I are spending $1,000 a month. Our cloud bill is huge here, right? Like
Yeah.
it's hundreds of thousands each month. And as you're
Yeah.
having that much of expense, the amount of business rigor to that expense comes in, and that's where FinOps will build into it.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I agree. Kind of, there are some obscurities that you do. The point I think I've kind of picked up on recently, because there's obviously for the last probably 18 months to 2 years now, people have been talking about cloud costs, right? And
Yeah.
that's why we've kind of we are where we are with cost optimization and FinOps becoming more prominent and so on. But if we look at the bottom line between a cloud bill versus a data center bill, I always feel that you're not getting the full story on your data center bill versus your cloud bill. Your cloud, it's itemized and you can see everything pretty much. And yeah, sometimes there's obscurities there and so on. But the bottom line that you're getting is essentially what you're using there, whether you're aware of it or not. But in the data center, I feel there's people talk about kind of, well, the data center is cheaper, or we repatriated some of our workloads, from the cloud back into the data center because it's cheaper, to do. But are you actually getting, are you 100% aware of your costs in the data center? Are you actually, um, checking everything? Are you being able to account for everything in the data center? What's your view on those on those two things?
It all depends on how sophisticated you are. It's like I'm taking away the OpEx versus CapEx argument. Like how a business can on their balance sheet show like different costs. Like let's say we had our own data center, we had Rich's data center, it's all yours. So you're able to like add up the cost quite quickly. That's saying, hey, the server is X, the hardware is Y, like the power we use is another dimension, the water, the utilities, the building lease, the network traffic. Like you can add up the software on the machines are all there. Like you could exactly see what it cost you. From a cloud vendor, they do obfuscate that a little bit. Now they will give you billing dimensions like, hey, data transfer like per X amount of kilobyte, megabyte, terabyte is this. We're billing you for storage at this. I mean, but they're marking each one of those up a little bit for billing overhead, right? So they are making margin, even though it's not like a high margin that some of the services. They are giving you margin, but they give you a really pretty, with asterisk bill, right? I've seen those bills before, so it's like page 309. Huh? how are we so far on the build this month?
Yeah,
Like clicking through it, right? So
right.
you get a really nice bill from a cloud vendor, but you have to track a lot harder. Like, but there's different like there's ITIL, IT service management. There's always
Mm,
like frameworks that will like kind of take over. Like businesses know how to track costs. Like and
mm.
not maybe Robbie's lemonade stand of Alpharetta, Georgia might not one person shop, but like if I was part of a bigger company, they're very good at like established businesses at tracking. Their accounting departments are like really good at
Right.
that. So
Okay. So for somebody who's kind of doing DevOps, whether it's in the data center or cloud, not really,
yeah,
important. Where can they kind of start to save on, costs of just kind of running that, that aspect
yeah.
of their IT?
Yeah, like as engineers, like we're natural optimizers, right? It's like we'll always like like we're here to just optimize, right? Either
Mm,
be performance, reliability, cost, because like there's a direct correlation between like like hey, like if you have more firepower, you
mm,
pay more because you have more infrastructure. I think the first thing to hyper focus on is like non-prod costs. They actually add up really, really quickly because like not like but prod when you're building things in production, like
mm,
you and I would properly size something. We'd say, what, for 10,000 concurrent users, like we would benchmark, we would do capacity planning
mm,
for prod. So it's very like we at least we know going into it about what prod would cost us.
mm.
Versus like non-prod, it's like, yeah, we had to develop something. We just don't know like when we need stuff. So like a lot of optimization can actually occur on non-prod environments.
Yeah,
The big non-prod thing, and this is a going joke, is like it's easy to turn something off, but it's hard to turn something back on when you need it. And that's why people don't turn things off, right? Just leave it on because it's like we could go kill servers like that. We can just go
mm,
terminate EC2 instances. Like I got terminated one right now for all we know, right? Like
yeah,
it's like very, very quick to do. But the problem is like when you need to turn it back on, like it's usually like is there another workload that requires it? Is there traffic that needs it? Like, oh,
yeah,
it takes like 15 minutes. It takes not 15 exaggeration, but take a couple of minutes for it to kind of repatriate and whatnot or
yeah.
rehydrate. And so that's what people just kind of leave it on. Like, yeah, it's not worth like the $3 for me to go turn it off for a couple hours. And that's it. Like if you focus on non-prod costs and you're kind of saying, hey, you know what, there will be a little bit of burn, but if you don't mind waiting a little bit to turn stuff back on, you can.
Yeah.
Also, one more shameless self plug, our cloud cost management product. So the company that we procured, they actually got their start by auto stopping, and auto starting
Okay.
VMs. So
Right.
they also focus on that really odd problem that like turning it back on is hard. So they in a really cool way they solve that problem that both for non-prod, right? And we go in a queue, kind of wait, say, oh, this instance is booting up, but they kind of automated the start back of that stuff.
Okay. And what about, I mean, in some cases where, for example, when we are helping customers, migrate into the public cloud. So when we take them from their sort of data center, maybe they're running sort of virtual machines or whatever into the cloud. In that instance, we normally do like an assessment of those, of those applications, so we can kind of figure
Yeah.
out what they're like and their dependencies and things like that. So is there scope for doing like an assessment of some kind when we engage with customers to help them with their cost management in the cloud? Is that kind of an option? Is that something that can
Yeah,
be
you
can be
can take
done?
a baseline, right? Like, oh, it's all about measurement at some point. Like,
Mm,
like what are you? It boils down to like, are you over or undersized? Most people
mm,
are oversized, but we do it for protection, right? Like,
yeah,
as a human, we would typically oversize our instances just because we don't want it like toppling over, And depending on your school of thought, right?
mm,
Like, I remember when we like the percents that we auto scale were going down and down. Like, I remember when I first were in the public cloud, like we wouldn't auto scale our instances until we hit like 95% usage. Like towards the end of it, we were doing 70%. We're like, if it
mm,
approaches 70%, go ahead and start something else. We don't want any interruption, right? So
right.
the appetite for interruption has got a lot lower. And so like, but also that means we have to have extra capacity to take in for those, times to boot up or cold start type of things that have to happen. They're similar, like it's going back to the heart of your question, right? Like taking a good baseline is if something's already running, like just kind of understanding like how much of it is how much are you using, how much,
Mm,
and certain systems make that easy, certain systems don't make that easy. Going back to our friend Kubernetes,
yeah,
to a point, Kubernetes makes that easy. I'll give you an example. Like you can measure like memory pressure like in a pod, right? Or you can measure like CPU utilization. But you would say, you know what, we're always at like 100%, always at
Yeah.
100%. So we size it differently. But there's like a point saying that, okay, like given that you're always at 100%, why did you size it like that? Or is something inefficient running in the application, right? And so
Right.
there's you keep going down the rabbit hole, like let's optimize for the size of the cluster. Then at some point you need to look at the workload, right? Like
Mm.
separating the infra and the workload, you still have to performance management is key, like hey, observability, performance management, experimentation, like those are very, very good disciplines. This goes back to, is it a DevOps engineer? Is it a platform engineer? Is it SRE? Who's going to solve that perf?
That's true. Yeah. That's another question, isn't it?
Yeah, that goes
Goes
back
back
to
to
the
that Venn diagram that we talked about, right? I
just
think it's
depending who does. I don't want to do that. That thing sucks.
yeah.
Give it to the other team next to that.
Pass it on to somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're good.
All right. So you guys talk about sort of enforcing real-time governance policies and auto remediation with your, I think you have something called cloud asset governance using governance as code, which is quite cool. Generating policies using AI-powered tools for cost effectiveness and security and compliance, I think is, again, very good. So I picked up a lot of this from the articles that you guys had on your website. And second, setting and tracking daily, monthly, quarterly, annual sort of budgets, real-time forecasting and alerts based on that. So I guess that's kind of more on the FinOps side. Like I would kind of see that as that sort of part of that sort of official process of, of applying FinOps and, into your cloud environment. Is that kind of, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, like a lot of the tooling, especially around our FinOps tooling, like it's let's say like it's very easy for a business of someone with like, let's say not extremely deep technical skills, but with good business skills to pick up on it. Like basically what we're doing is we're charting, like we're doing that, like it's very simple, it's math. It's boring math if you have to do it by hand, but like there's a lot of like input you have to take. But it's like we're charting like, hey, based on your spend today and tomorrow, or based on your spend yesterday and today, like the increase or decrease, and then if you continue at this rate, like it will look like this in 30 days or 6 months, right? And so we're doing all sorts of math for you on your behalf, which is cool. It takes like that pressure off of you to kind of chart that and like, you go in Excel hell or Google Sheet hell and deal with these financial models to go show people, right? So like it's we take it off your plate with our product. And so, but the answer is like yes, like it's very business centric. Like so, my team, we created the certifications for our cloud cost management program, and compared to the rest of our modules, we're actually, the questions we ask are a lot more business centric questions, right? So if we're taking our GitOps certification, it's very technical, the questions that we're asking you, like about like how you do about, is it a good fit for GitOps? Is like, how would you do this? Versus like we're asking like more business centric questions in our cloud cost management certification that we have. And so there is a very big overlap for business and technical in FinOps.
Okay, excellent. I think we're pretty much there on the three topics. I think we've covered quite a lot in this particular episode. So thank you, Ravi, for all your input. I really appreciate it. And your insights are always useful. Always make me think about something new and learn something new, which is the main point, I guess. So how did you enjoy Class State to Play? What was kind of did you enjoy kind of participating? What's your view?
It was good. Yeah. I really enjoyed being on did you say Cloud State of Play or Cloud?
Yeah, Class State to Play is this particular episode that we do. It's our monthly one.
I love it. I was like, you're the cloud therapist. What is cloud?
I am. Cloud therapist is the channel. Hello, Ravi. That's the channel, and Class State to Play is the monthly episode that I do.
Oh, I love it. Yeah,
we always pick on different things, but I thought that it was just really cool to. Because you're at Harness, it was kind of, I thought we'll maybe kind of make it a little bit more around DevOps and things like that, because I think there's a lot going on. As we said, we mentioned platform engineering and GitOps and things like that. So I think that's all extremely relevant right now.
Yeah, it's been great. Yeah, and really, these topics are like definitely front and center of mind to a lot of people, and it's been fun talking about them with the cloud therapist. I'm like, what did the cloud therapist ask me? Like, so always good to go chat, and I would recommend giving the podcast a listen. And if anybody wants to be a guest, just contact Richard. So it's a good conversation to have.
Fantastic. Okay, so as we said, guys, all the links for the stuff that we talked about will be in the description of the video. And I think we mentioned quite a few articles and things like that. And I'd love to hear from you guys. Are you experiencing any of the things that we talked about? Please drop us some comments. Tell us what you guys are up to. Are you doing DevOps? Are you doing GitOps? Are you doing cost management and things like that? How are you fitting in all of these into your environments? Is platform engineering something that you have been doing or are now starting to look at, and so on? Yeah, really appreciate any comments that you have, any insights and things like that. That'll be quite cool. And yeah, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel as always to support me. Thanks for watching, and bye for now. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.